Good evening, Madam President. It is 6 p.m. I've started the recording.
Thank you, Mr. McCoy. Welcome, everyone. We're going to open the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Dr. Henderson.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please stand for a moment of silent meditation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Henderson. Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Ms. Burton,
Here.
Ms. Green, Dr. Henderson,
Here.
Mr. Howard,
Here.
Mr. Levenstein,
Here.
Ms. Maida,
Here.
Ms. Mineo,
Here.
Mr. Stridarn,
Here.
Mr. Walker.
Be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby recesses into executive session for the following purpose: matter made confidential in DFERPA, employment history of particular individuals, matters leading to the employment of particular individuals, collective bargaining under the Taylor Law, NTA, CSCA, NASA, and to obtain advice from legal counsel. I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So move.
Second.
Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levenstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Mr. Stridarn,
Yes.
Ms. Burton.
Yes.
Thank you. We'll see you in exec session.
Good evening, Madam President. The recording started back up.
Thank you. I apologize to everybody for the length of time we had to spend in exec, but it was hard work, but we got through it. So thank you. I'm going to turn this over to our acting superintendent, Mr. Forget.
Thank you, Madam President. Good evening, board members and community. This evening, we have a few presentations to share with you. We're going to start with Mr. Bear sharing a little bit of information with regards to COVID updates in the district. Mr. Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Forget. Thank you, Board of Ed members, community, and faculty that might be watching tonight. As we have promised, we will be providing regular updates on where we are with COVID and the protocols that are in place as a result of a commissioner's decision, especially from September 2nd, as well as a board resolution from August. So I'm just going to update you on where we are with some of the activities. Again, we have the vaccination drive still up there. We have not been able to update a new vaccination drive. I've been in regular contact with some of the agencies around the area. They're interested in doing an updated drive for 5 to 11-year-olds, but right now there's just some concerns around staffing. They've all agreed that they think that because of the age group developmentally, they want pediatricians to be available. And with everything going on, they're not necessarily at this point in a position to commit to that, but they want to. I also have some other leads I'm working on, hopefully working with some of the area pharmacies who could maybe help us in that. So I'm hoping by December to have something in place. As far as the screening testing, we, as you know, we were starting and providing the weekly testing as per the board resolution and the commissioner's determination. And then we ran out of tests because there's a shortage throughout this nation. I've talked about how we reached out to a number of places to get tests, Abbott directly, which is the one who makes the Binex test, as well as the State Education Department and some private vendors. It took a while. We also had, as the board remembers, last board meeting, we got a donation of over 350 tests from a summer camp, and we were able to apply those, as well as we got somewhere around 450 from the state. So we'll go into more detail over that. But right now, this past week, we restarted, and we tested 180 employees. And as you can see, we are not getting the number of positives out of this, which is good news. So again, this is just a rolling number. These are the numbers that have been previously provided. I'm just starting in October. I don't want to create 7 pages, but it just kind of gives you a sense of the trend. As you will see in October 15th, between positive cases and quarantines, between the 15th, 22nd, and the 29th, things were staying relatively stable. If you go to the next slide, you will see, interestingly, on November 5th, again, the numbers in terms of at least student positive cases and quarantines were similar to the previous weeks. Those staff, you could see only 3 teachers were positive, no staff, and no staff or teachers had to be quarantined. What's curious is that that's about 6 days after, 5 or 6 days after Halloween. There's always a question when we have large gatherings, which makes the next data point a week later even more interesting, because you can see that, again, a relatively small number of positive cases as well as teachers and staff quarantined, but the students were greatly reduced. We only had 45 students who were quarantined that week on November 12th, and that's about 13 days after Halloween. So again, we're trying to track, are there trends that we can identify when we have large gatherings or holidays, an area that we need to at least pay attention to. And then you could see on November 19th, the week after that, the numbers did go up a bit, especially both on the students and staff students for quarantine and for testing positive. So I just want to remind everybody what the mandate is based on the commissioner's decision from September 2nd. We have to have all employees tested unless they show proof of vaccination, which I'll discuss. We need to offer testing to the unvaccinated students and families to provide consent. And again, we will talk about that. Test and vaccinated employees weekly, which, like I showed, we've already been doing that with some small interruption. And then offer diagnostic testing on site or via referral if a person is symptomatic or they're asymptomatic following exposure. So those are the mandates we had. I sent out in October a Google form to the staff. I'm really, really pleased by this. I know this is just a number, but whenever you do a survey, it's very difficult to get a high buy-in to it. We got over 1,000 responses. So the employees were required to give us proof of their vaccination status. We have no interest in holding those, but we are right now gathering them just so we can keep track of who's been vaccinated. And over 1,000, right now it's 1,048 staff members provided proof that they've been vaccinated, which is wonderful news in terms of how the vaccination drives are working, and our employees have taken this seriously, as well as the fact that they actually demonstrated to us that that vaccination is in place. So if we didn't get that proof, according to the commissioner's determination, we would have to start testing anyone who didn't supply proof. So I really want to thank the employees, and this is everybody, teachers, administrators, kitchen staff, security, everyone was wonderful about this and did what was asked of them. So I really gave the community a great kudos for doing so. We also solicited from families whether they were interested. We got 60 families who expressed interest. We've held off on that because of the fact that we did not have tests. Now that we've gotten some tests and we're hoping to keep our stockpile fairly healthy, we hope to do that after the holiday and reach out again to families and start that process as well. And then we have offer a referral. There's a link that parents can go on where they can we're not required to do the testing in district if we can provide referrals out of district. And to date, really no family is out, no employee or student has asked us for testing based on the conditions I had described. And then, like I mentioned, we started the unvaccinated testing of unvaccinated on November 17th and hope to continue that going forward. So again, I'm going to reiterate the shortage. It's still there. We asked, there are 372 from the donation, another 480 from the New York State Department of Health. We asked for 3,000, and that's all we got right now. We don't know, and they're not necessarily forthcoming of when the next supply may arrive. They are beholden to the supply chain, like most folks these days. So we're hoping to get them soon, and then they're going to do them in smaller doses or smaller amounts. Again, I mentioned we're trying to do the vaccination drive. We've reached out to Middletown Medical. I am reached out today to some of the local pharmacies because I heard that they may be interested. They have folks that can come in as contracted vaccination drives, put people to do the drives, and I'm hoping to get something out of that. And then we're finalizing a partnership with a local agency to provide the consistent inventory. Again, one of my fears is that I'm beholden to a supply chain that is very irregular. This particular agency has the supplies to provide regular testing and provide the Department of Health the results and do the testing and take that out of the hands of our nurses right now. Our nurses would simply be required just to do the test, but not to necessarily manage the results of the test. And we're hoping to have something in place in December. So that's my update with regard to COVID. I believe that's the last slide.
Thank you.
Right?
Mr. Stridiron has a question.
Thank you, Madam President. If you can go back to the slide with the numbers of, I think it was November 9th. Yeah, that one right there. So how is it possible that you have, say, November 19th, 9 teachers test positive, but only 2 teachers are quarantined? Shouldn't that number always be at least that number or higher? Because
the Department of Health. I'm sorry, Mr. Stradine.
Because the student numbers are always higher, but the teachers' numbers always are lower.
So the Department of Health and the CDC distinguishes between positive cases and close contact. So if you are positive, you are isolated, and that's a separate data set from those who are in close contact but have not demonstrated symptoms at this point. So based on the evidence, and you're going to remember that part of the rules is if a person is vaccinated, they are not required to quarantine. They just simply have to observe their symptoms over the next 5 to 10 days. And it's encouraged by the CDC, but not required that that employee be tested. You can see from the spreadsheet that, the form that was sent out to our community, we have well over 1,050 people that demonstrated that they're vaccinated out of our employee pool. So they are not required to quarantine.
So if you have a teacher that tests positive for COVID, they can continue to be in the classroom teaching students if they're vaccinated,
No, there's differences on the left.
isolated.
Is they're isolated, and the conditions are very clear. If you're
Okay.
positive, you are isolated. You must you'd be out of the out of the public for 10 days. If you
So-
are close contact, but you have not shown any symptoms and you're not vaccinated, remember that's the second condition, then you are quarantined for the period of time that's required.
Okay. And then I saw there was 180 staff members or teachers that were tested. But we,
Those are the I keep interrupting you. I apologize.
so it's okay, but 9 teachers still tested positive. So they were vaccinated teachers that got COVID.
We can't presume. Again, we do have a combination of unvaccinated employees as well as vaccinated. I can't tell you whether those 9, because that's down primarily Department of Health manages that. I am not aware of the individual members that may test positive, because that process is controlled by the Department of Health. They do tell us. We keep that strictly confidential. Our health service facilitator is the one who keeps that information very close to the vest. I don't get involved in those individuals.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bear. Mr. Forget?
Thank you, Ms. Mineo. Our second presentation is a capital project update, and we have, I'll turn this over to Dr. Spindler to introduce the presenters.
Okay, we have Mr. Luis Rodriguez here to present an update on our capital project, what we're working on, what we're moving forward with, also giving us an update in our recent bids. And Mr. Roger Ramjug is here in the event that there's any clarifying questions. So take it away, Lou.
Hey guys, thank you. I'll try to make this quick. I know you guys have had a long night. So the agenda, really what we want to do is just talk about what's currently happening on site, and also talking about the bid process for Heritage and Valesgate. I don't have control of the screen, so okay, yeah, there we go. So yeah, we want to talk about phase 2A, which was awarded for the site clearing for the CTE project. We want to talk about phase 3 and phase 5 work that we went out to bid with, and give you an overview of what occurred for the bidding and what our next steps are, and answer any questions you guys might have. So just because we've been moving along, I think that this is the positive part of the conversation. We were successful with the pool project. We were successful with the New Windsor demo. We hit our numbers. We were on target with everything. Same thing with the phase 2A project, the CT. This is for the site clearing. We hit our numbers. We have 2 contractors out there. Hazardous material. This was really associated with the building demos, the existing buildings that were there, and any underlying conditions, buried tanks and whatnot. So there was a hazmat component that we for remediation. And then the site construction is really clearing the site, taking down the necessary trees that are in the building footprint, and any stumping and grading, rough grading that's associated with that. Stormwater, we are also putting in preliminary stormwater detention just to get us into our next phase. And that's really what's happening. So you see the schedule status. We mobilized in the 3rd week of October. We abated the buildings. We abated one building in particular. We demoed the Odell office building. We started tree removal at the beginning of November. We had the demolition of the maintenance building from at the beginning of November, and we started retention pond. The site currently is secure. We've also have the site containment fabric. To the best of our ability, we're trying to make sure the site is safe. At the end of every day, we make sure that we lock the site up at the main entrances. Any vehicles that are on site are you know, we want to make sure any keys are taken out, and, you know, again, no mischief, we hope, would happen after hours. So we have the site containment. Next slide is really just showing how the lot has really changed with the site clearing aspect. And then the next slide really talks to the logging operation. So there's three different things that are happening. There are 20 to 30 trees that were allocated to the construction academy, and really it's going to be how many trees can we put down there as far as the logs that we were getting out. So there's some nice trees there. Next thing I want to talk about is the bidding process for Heritage and Valesgate. So for phase 3 Heritage, we went out to bid additions, renovations. Heritage Middle School, we had an addition to the cafeteria, and a big part of this scope was mechanical upgrades through the building to bring in, to upgrade the air quality. The budget for the project was $6.46 million. The low bids, not including any alternates, came in at $8.5 million. Delta, we were about $2.1 million over budget. The industry right now, is, I think everybody knows and is seeing it, there's been a significant escalation in the industry. And in particular, there's been an escalation in the air quality side of the industry. The government gave out a lot of money to a lot of public entities to upgrade air quality. Everyone's taking advantage of it, and the mechanical suppliers are taking advantage of it as well. So there is a delta there, and I do point out just some bullets: increased costs. What may have caused it during our qualifications? The mechanical units alone. There's increase in scope of mechanical units, increase in scope of sheet metal, increase in scope of copper and conduits. On the electrical side as well, we're seeing a significant increase, 5 times what the number was last year, just to give you an idea, in copper and conduit. Black pipe, this is associated with the chiller. Again, this is 10 times the cost. The black pipe on this project was extreme. So that just gives you an idea of where some of the big numbers were on this phase 3 hit. Phase 5, Valesgate. So when you look at Valesgate, we purposely bid Valesgate 3 weeks later because we wanted to give contractors the opportunity that didn't get Heritage to come in and look at Valesgate. And that worked really well. When you look at both of the bids, we were deep, 7 to 8 contractors deep on all the trades. So we had a great turnout on both of these projects. So there was a lot of interest and a lot of competitive bidding. The construction budget for this project was $5.6 million. Again, in addition, a music room and choral room addition and mechanical upgrades throughout the rest of the building. Low bids came in at $8 million, and the delta at Valesgate shows us being $2.4 million over budget. Again, some of the major cost overruns: mechanical units, sheet metal, copper conduit. That building required, because of the mechanical upgrades, required a whole new service in that building. So those are some of the things we talked about. After the bids occurred, we met with the contractors, and of course, we are continuing to meet on a regular basis, trying to figure out how do we best value engineer this project, look at all aspects: mechanical, electrical, plumbing, interior finishes. We're looking at everything under a microscope to see how can we get these 2 projects back to a place where we can bid them again. Market manufacturing trends will continue to be scrutinized as well. Right now, we are on a roller coaster ride when it comes to the industry. We want to make sure we value and do scope reductions that are best for the district. But at the same time, we have to be careful that we're not being taken advantage of by by manufacturers. So we're really taking them to task. This first slide really talks to the heritage bid and what we initially have done to try to make up for that difference in the bids. So you're going to see on the first column, you'll see MDS, and that was a low bidder on the mechanical contract. And this was a breakout of all of their numbers. What we've done, and this is conceptually the first step, is going for a UV to UV replacement, meaning the UV that comes out, a new UV with a self-contained compressor will go back in its place. The current design has a UV with a ducted system above the ceiling. So what we're looking at is just refining the design. You'll see the unit ventilators are more because Heritage had a chiller. We're in this idea, the chiller would come out. We're going with a package system. Rooftop units would stay the same. You'll see item number 3, the chiller gets removed. So that's a savings. There's VRFs, which is a refrigerant system that's in the cafeteria. That stays the same. Controls will reduce because the scope is reduced. Ductwork will reduce. Of course, we're eliminating a lot of ductwork. There will be ductwork in the cafeteria to remain. Work hours, we were looking at a second shift differential. That will stay the same. Copper materials will get reduced. The black pipe that I mentioned that was associated with the chiller, that gets removed. Duct cleaning that was part of the whole project, that gets removed except for some minor ducts that's left. Labor, of course, decreases because of all the work that gets removed. So we're looking at a $4.5 million HVAC contract that we're looking to hopefully hit at 3.2. Additional savings for we agreed upon were scope reductions of 1.1 million. And that really talks to some additional items that were put into the bid. We were hoping if we had a good bid day, we would add some work. So we have some alternates that we're going to recommend that add up to 1.1 million. We have electrical reductions. The 175 is the electrical reductions associated with that chiller system. That's the big hit right there. And general construction, the 100 grand is really reductions associated with the ceiling work and whatnot that, for doing that work. So we're looking at potential savings of $2.8 million. Valesgate, we did the same exercise. Valesgate, we're still, because it's fresher, it's newer, we're still going through it. But the idea here was Valesgate had packaged unit ventilators, but again, they were tied to a fully ducted system in the ceiling. We're still going with a packaged unit. That's why you'll see line item 1 is 1-for-1. We have AON units. Those are rooftop units and air handling units. Currently, they're still the same specified. I'm saying they're 1-for-1. Controls will be reduced based on a redesign. Fin tube. Per the design, there was exterior fin tube on the exterior walls that was to be removed and replaced. Per this design, we would keep the existing fin tube that's in place. Ductwork. We would eliminate the ductwork in the ceilings. When we also had duct insulation, ductwork, that all gets removed. HVAC piping gets reduced significantly because now we're going back to the 1-for-1 replacement. Fan coil splits, startup. The labor, of course, reduces. So we're looking at a $2.8 to $1.6 million difference. And under the GC, so you look at the HVAC savings, potentially we're at 1.2 million. Under the GC, we're recommending potentially another 200,000. There's a Canopy Addition to the building. It's a covered walkway, so we're recommending that be looked at. Next steps, we're going to redesign both packages, put them out to bid. we need some time to redesign both of those packages. So we're looking to get those packages out to bid in early February and look toward late March, early April, and start construction in late spring. I know that was fast. Again, we're on site, guys. So I always say this: we are on site full time. There's a lot of work still going on at the CTE site. So we try to do our best to make sure the students are not in contact with the contractors. We're trying to keep the site safe up there. So I got any questions? I know I ran through that pretty quick.
Mr. Stradine, I see your hand.
Thank you, Madam President. So thank you for the presentation. So with all the changes to the duct system and the chiller, you're still going to have air conditioning in the sections that we're going to have air conditioning, right? It's not removing air conditioning.
It's not removing air conditioning. What we're doing is going with a different way of air conditioning. Instead of using a chiller, we're going with a contained package using refrigerant.
Okay. And the second question I had, there was an email that was sent to the board on November 19th from Naomi Herson. I don't know if anybody forwarded that email to you or to anyone in the team, but was that those questions in the email ever answered?
Yes, sir. Those were answered. I sent that on. Mr. Ford, you want to answer that one?
Yes, Mr. Ranjak spent some time responding to that inquiry.
And could we just get a bird's eye view of what the answer was as far as what the changes were made?
Sure. Mr. Ramjuk, can you share in a brief response?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Forget. Good evening, Mr. Stradine, ladies and gentlemen. So we met with the leaders of the environmental groups as recently as Friday. There was concern about the number of trees that were being removed on the site were more than what was necessary to be removed. Despite conversations, there was still some skepticism on the part of the community members. So we invited them to come to the site. We walked them through the plan. There was still some skepticism about why the trees had to be removed or why the lot had to be used for the facility. But I feel comfortable that those leaders and those community members were aware what would like to preserve as many trees.
I'm going to call on Mr. Howard.
Thank you, Madam President. How you doing, Mr. Rodriguez? So I see there was a lot of bidding processes going on. I was curious, were any considerations given in those bids for the minority and women-owned business enterprises? The rules that follows that?
Yeah, I'm hearing a ring in the background. So that's a good question, Mr. Howard. What we try to do is make sure this project does support minority participation. There is language in the general conditions that says that we promote minority participation. We cannot require it in this project. I don't believe I've never had a requirement for a participation percentage in a school project, but that would be something that maybe Mr. Shaw could talk to, but we do have language in there saying we promote it, and we do during our qualification process, we do ask if they've used any local contractors, local minority contractors. So we do go through that exercise.
So my reason for my question is, as a district, we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and part of that work is the people that work for us and the vendors and the people that we bring in. We want to show that we are inclusive, that we are diverse. And sometimes I believe I was reading somewhere where that is almost a part of the law right now. I mean, I could be wrong, but I know I read that. So I was just curious, is that part of the bidding process with our school district when we're bidding out this large compact bond?
No. So again, we do not have a minimum minority participation requirement built into the bids. And again, with school projects, I've never seen that language in there. But again, I'm not saying that we shouldn't have it. I just haven't seen it in public school work.
Okay, thank you.
And we do have the project labor agreement, which in parallel we do promote the minority aspect of it as well.
Thank you.
Mrs. Burton?
So my question is, now that the community has opened up, but I've received, I can only speak for myself, have been asked by quite a few people what's going on in that area, particularly since it's very visible now that the spacing has happened. The trees have been cut down. So what has the district provided to the community, particularly in that area, but just in general? People are curious as to what is going on. And I think it's twofold. I think it's one, they should know what's going on, but number two, I think they should know what's coming, right? And because we have such a wonderful project, maybe think about, adding in some marketing around this. Maybe even the city of Newburgh can send some kind of notification to homeowners about what this is, what this facility is, and what impact it's going to have to our community. So that's all, just a suggestion.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez and Mr. Ramjug and Dr. Spindler. At this point, we are going to provide for you our annual New York State assessment update. If you remember, last year, we offered the grades 3 through 8 English language arts and math assessments to those students that were participating in person for their instruction, or if they were virtual, the students came in to take the test. So I will turn this over to Ms. Soto and Mrs. Moriarty.
Thank you, Mr. Forget. Good evening, everybody. So before we begin our presentation this evening, we thought that it's important to inform the board and the public that upon receiving the results of our students who participated in the assessments this year, the New York State Commissioner, Ms. Betty Rosa, and the Mid-Hudson Regional Information Center provided all districts with a disclaimer saying that this assessment results are not representative of the entire student population. And that's because a significantly less group of students participated in the assessments this year. And also that we should not compare the results from year to year. So we're not using it to compare to previous year's results. So I just wanted to be upfront about that as we go through the presentation this evening. Our presentation this evening will provide you with some overall results of how our students did and performed in grades 3 through 8, and highlight the standards where our students performed well and where we still need some improvement. We'll inform you of our next steps and our expectations, as well as an appendix of some sample questions. You can stay right here, thank you. And we also wanted to share with you how we use the data from a district level, a building level, and a classroom level. So at the district level, we communicate the state results with our parents and our guardians. I'll show you more information pertaining to that in a second. The data that we receive drives our curriculum decisions. So how do we progress monitor? How do we revise unit maps? How do we use this in planning for professional development and moving our classrooms and our instructional offerings forward? At the building level, they review and analyze the data by grade level and by subgroups. They go much deeper into the data. They use that data to set their goals for school-wide building plans and for their school comprehensive education plans that we call SEPs. We also use it in determining our AIS, our academic intervention services, and we share, and the buildings share and communicate information with the parents and guardians in a much deeper and break down the information to really inform parents and guardians of where students are performing well and where they need to continue to strive and work a little bit harder. The classroom teachers use this data to provide small group instruction. So how do they group the students and then target that instruction, as well as providing interventions and enrichment where we can do that. Next slide, please. This is a sample. I know it's hard to see, but you all have access to the PowerPoint. This is the sample of assessment letter that goes to parents. So I said that the district informs parents of how their students performed. Normally here, you would see a score. Some of you who are parents or guardians have seen this letter before, and what that score equates to in a level, a 4, 3, 2, or a 1, with some findings of what those levels mean. So it's a very high level informational letter to parents, and that's where the buildings go much deeper into the information with their parents and their families. Next slide, please. So here you see grade 3. I will provide information regarding grades 3, 4, and 5, ELA and math, and then some overall findings at the end of those slides. Students in grades 3 across our district, 61% of our third graders participated in the ELA and 63% participated in our math. Of that 61% of third graders who took the assessment, 43% scored a level 3 or a 4, which is really good. That's where we want them scoring. And 57% scored a level 1 or a 2. In math, 26% of our third graders who participated in the math assessment scored a level 3 or a 4, and 74 scored a level 1 or 2. Below on this slide, you can see where their strengths and areas of need are highlighted for ELA and math. So I'll give that a second for you to glance over. Next slide, please. Our students in grade 4 who participated, 53% of all of our fourth graders participated in the ELA, and 56% of our fourth graders participated in our math assessment. Again, you can see that 43% of those students who took the ELA exam in fourth grade scored a level 3 or 4, where 57 scored a 1 or 2 in the ELA. And for the math, 41% scored a level 3 or 4, and 59% scored a 1 or a 2. And there highlights where we're doing well and where we still need to improve. Next slide, please. So in grade 5, 57% of all of our fifth graders in the district participated in the ELA. 25% of them scored a level 3 or a 4, and 75% scored a level 1 or a 2. In math, we had 58% of our students take the assessment, 21% of those students scoring a 3 or a 4, and 79% scoring a 1 or a 2. So our overall takeaways for our strengths in ELA is that our students are doing well on determining meaning of unknown words, their overall academic vocabulary, comparing and contrasting points of view, and describing characters and their contributions. We need to continue to work on focusing on the main idea from informational text, our determining relations between events and concepts, and comparing and contrasting 2 or more concepts. That's our ELA skills, where we'll continue to focus. For math, we're doing well in telling and writing time, on finding a product of a whole, and word problems involving multiplication. We have a lot of work to do with fractions, equivalent fractions, adding and subtracting fractions, and multiplying fractions. I'm now going to turn it over to Ms. Soto to discuss 6 through 8.
Thank you, Mrs. Moretti. Good evening, Board of Education members. I will now provide you with an overview of our 6 through 8 assessment data. So in grade 6, there was a 51% participation rate where 40% of our students scored a 3 or better in ELA. 53% of our students fell below proficiency rate. Our students scored well by showing their understanding of how the central ideas and themes in literature are being expressed by the author. And they also showed understanding of terms and terminology relating to interpreting and meaning of words and phrases using context. In math, while there was 52% participation rate, 18% of our students scored a 3 or better in mathematics. 82% fell below the proficiency rate. They need additional support. Our students' strengths lie in problem solving and non-negative rational numbers. I'll give you just a couple of seconds to review additional information under strengths and areas of need. Next slide, please. In grade 7, there was 38% participation rate, where 33% of our students scored 3 or better in English language arts. 67% need additional support. Again, our students scored well by showing their understanding of how the central ideas and themes in literature are being expressed by the author. Also, we see that the area in need in 6th grade students is similar to 7th grade students. We see those students are struggling to analyze informational texts. In math, we had a 40% participation rate, where 17% of our students scored 3 or better. 83% of our students need additional support. In grade 7, students need to further develop their understanding of rates and ratio using tables, graphs, and equations. Again, I'll give you some time to quickly review our strengths and areas of need. Next slide, please. In grade 8, there was a 42% participation rate, where 43% of our students scored 3 or better in English language arts. 57% need additional support. Our students have the ability to analyze text and dialogue. However, they are struggling to analyze the development and connection of people, ideas, and events in text. In mathematics, we had 30% participation rate, where 5% of our students scored at a proficient level. 95% of our students are in need of additional support. Our 8th grade students struggled with illustrative math texts. Again, I'll provide additional time to review strengths and areas of needs in this grade level. Next slide, please. Although comparisons, as Ms. Moriarty mentioned, should not be made statewide, the results can still provide a snapshot of student attainment in learning standards at the classroom level. The test results are being used at our level to help teachers shape students' individualized learning. Based on the data gleaned from New York State assessments, we created the next step, specifying our district's professional work this year. The directors will continue to support teachers with, pardon me, I apologize, I jumped ahead. The following 2 slides are synthesized information for grades 3 through 8. The blue portion in the pie signifies proficiency and the yellow signifies students in need of support. This slide is our subgroup assessment data for ELA. Next slide, please. This slide is our 3 through 8 subgroup assessment for mathematics. After reviewing the slides, our instinct is to use root cause analysis to determine why a group of students perform differently than other groups. However, based on these 2 slides, it is evident that most of our 3 through 8 student body needs support across the board. Next slide, thank you. So as I mentioned before, although comparisons should not be made statewide, we are using these results at our level to help teachers shape students' individualized learning. And based on the data, we created next steps specifying our district's professional work this year. So our directors will continue to support teachers with small group instruction. They will host professional development and work closely to support our teachers. We will continue to collaborate as teams to revise our curriculum as necessary. We will continue professional development to support balanced literacy curriculum and math centers. We will provide staff development with consultants for our principals and teachers with personalized and differentiated support and a focus on building student independence and stamina. The teachers will continue to collaborate during their vertical team meetings and department meetings to review not only how standards grow, but how our curriculum grows as well. We will have continue to do classroom visits and study groups around conferring and small group instruction. We will have common assessments data cycle. It's currently implemented in the middle level where we analyze data throughout the year to identify areas of concern. There is a renewed focus on supporting our students. We've identified at being at risk, such as expanding the range of interventions, such as providing our students with a 90-minute block instruction. We will continue to review and analyze data on a local level, utilizing our common assessments, iReady, early data to determine curriculum areas that need to be strengthened, enhanced, or adjusted. We also monitor and provide support to struggling students in mathematics and provide focused fluency support where needed in language arts. We'll utilize building level child study teams to ensure that students' individual needs are being met. In each of the buildings, teachers and directors will provide monthly updates on student progress. Mrs. Moriarty?
Thank you. Next slide, please. The appendix below just shows you some of the questions that our students are faced with when taking these assessments. It will provide a common understanding of the complexity of the questions. It'll demonstrate how the standards scaffold throughout the grade level, so how the questions and the standards that we're teaching to evolve over the grade levels. And this is how we design our instruction and our lessons to teach the standards. And then these assessments are modeled after those standards. So that's for the public and for the board to review the types of questions that our students are asked when participating in the assessment. That concludes our presentation this evening.
Thank you. I see a number of board members have some questions. Mrs. Burton?
So when you say a 90-minute block in the math, what exactly does that mean? Because overall, and it's in ELA, of course, I know you know this, but the math ones and twos are horrendous. And so what is the root cause of that? Is it that teachers aren't teaching math? I don't know, but what does a 90-minute block, what is that going to do if you are literally like 1 or 2 grades behind in math? What does that mean? It's almost like you have to have remediation and the kids have to know what they're doing currently. So please explain.
Madam President, may I speak?
Yes, I'm trying to unmute myself. Yes,
Okay,
Mrs.
thank you.
Moriarty, go ahead.
So yes, Ms. Burton, you're correct. So a 90-minute math block allows for the whole group instruction, the introduction of the lesson and the standard that they're working on in that current unit map. It also provides the students the opportunity to practice the skill, to use manipulatives, go into centers, play math games to practice the concept that they're being taught. It also allows time for the teacher to conference with students and provide small group remediation and instruction. We anticipated there being a dip in our math scores, and that's why we extended the math block from 60 to 90 minutes to allow more small group and instruction and time for students to practice the skills that they're being taught.
Can I just add on, are we adding on more support in the classrooms for this?
We are, you mean teacher-wise, like additional teachers?
teachers, assistant teachers? Are people pushing, other people
Yeah,
are
there,
pushing in? Because
there
this
is some push in
there's a lot of,
AIS.
there's a lot
Sorry.
of work that needs to be done in math and ELA. So that's a lot on a one-person teacher doing all of that in a classroom. So what are these classrooms looking like in terms of adult support?
So, Madam President, perhaps Ms. Moriarty, you want to just share a little bit about how we're using the future ARP money, the American Rescue Plan money, to target learning loss and address
Thank
these
you.
issues?
Yep. So we do have push in. AIS teachers do push in, and then in the primary grades, we do have support for teaching assistants. However, moving forward, you've heard a lot about us discussing our American Rescue Plan money. And one of the things that we're looking to focus on is having instructional coaches, specifically around ELA and math, to continue to help to support the classroom teachers in creating the centers, to creating an understanding of, if you're a fifth grader performing on a third grader, what do those remedial lessons look like? How do we provide time within our day and within the structure, the workshop model of how we're delivering the instruction where students can get that extra time needed to practice the skills?
Yeah, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but just so you're aware, we currently have one math instructional support person who is a master teacher who is in classroom supporting this. It's a model that we need to expand because Mr. Brady is making amazing change and being very successful. So we need to capitalize on that.
One of the other things we're doing is really capitalizing on how we're using our iReady instructional arm, how we're using our Do the Math, and our Reflex Math. These are software resources where students can practice right at the level where they are.
Mr. Levinstein.
Thank you, Madam President. So I have a question. So I understand that we should not look at the year-to-year data for a few reasons. One of them being it's a smaller sample set, and one of them being it was not a normal year of teaching. I also understand that it's disappointing amount of level 3 and level 4 students in the testing. But one thing that I think, even with the smaller sample set, if you could possibly bring up the subgroup assessments, I think that's really telling. And if you look at, I think the ELA, if that could be put up, some of the subgroups, and again, it's a smaller amount, but we're talking about a different percentage now, and it's not uniform across the different subgroups. This chart here for ELA, where 67% of white students are 3 to 4, but if you look at some of the others, English language learners are 10%, students with disabilities 12%, Black 30%. I think that this is a telling slide, and this data can be used. It has nothing to do with year to year. It has to do within our district and age groups and subgroups. So I think it's very important, and this is hopefully something we could work to fixing. Thank you.
Mr. Howard.
Thank you, Madam President. I got to be perfectly honest. These slides are devastating. As I look at the slides, and as Mr. Levinstein said, they definitely tell a story. And the most glaring story is you see the difference in the Black, African Americans, Hispanic, Latino, multiracial, students with disabilities, Ls, and economically disadvantaged. Then you see the white. You see the difference. It's almost night and day. I would just hope and pray that we as a district, with this extra money that we have, that we try to get some more AIS math teachers, coaches, tutoring. I know you go to other school districts that aren't as disadvantaged as ours. A lot of those students have tutors, they have access to resources to really get them across the finish line. I will just hope and pray that we find ways to use the resources and the money to go to the need. As these slides tell us, an incredible story about our district. And I'm overwhelmed. I just had to say that. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Howard. I agree with you wholeheartedly. You all know that when I see this, you know that something's going to come out of my mouth that I'm not very happy with. I think we need to really talk about this and we need to do something about this. This is not good at all. And I'm going to leave it at that. Mr. Howard, your hand is still up. You have something else to say? No? Okay. Mrs.
sorry.
Burton?
Yeah, so as troubling as the data may be, I really want to say thank you to Mr. Forget and your team for, putting it out there, because Mr. Forget, and I've said this, and to, Ms. Moriarty and others, I've said this, we can't deal with what we don't know, right? So now we know. And now we know what we need to do. We need to do not just the school district, but the community. And I say us collectively, we have to handle this, and we will. And we'll do the best we can and support you all, because these are all of our children. Every last one of them belong to all of us. So I applaud you for being vulnerable and putting it out there, because now we can deal with it and do the best we can with what we have and move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for those words, Mrs. Burton. That was really, really very, very good and very kind. Mr. Stridiron.
Thank you, Madam President. So I saw that the 8th grade math scores were 5% at level 3 and 4. So those students right now are most likely in the 9th grade. So specifically at the 9th grade level, what is specifically being done at the high schools to address that situation?
May I speak, Madam President, Mr. Forget?
Go ahead, Mrs. Soto.
So in the 9th grade level, we have AIS teachers. We have additional support for those students. In addition, we have after school support with the Empire program that hopefully will be up and running next week, virtually as well for our students. And our teachers are getting additional training. Our directors are providing our teachers with additional support and professional development to support our students.
Yeah, in addition to that, Mr. Stridiron, we've also strategically reassigned the directors to be housed in the high school. So they are now closer to the classroom and closer to the students. And they will be, as Mr. Glascott returns and we set up the structure for embedded support, one of their particular responsibilities will be to get into those classrooms and to really work based on not just the performance on the 3 through 8 assessment, but our local assessments as well. So it's a strategic move to really get the directors to focus more at the secondary level. And if we move with the instructional coach model, that will address the curriculum needs at the elementary level under the leadership of Mrs. Moriarty.
Thank you for that information. Just a follow-up question. This year's state assessments are happening in April, correct? Do we have district-wide assessments a week before that? Is that true? I heard that the scheduling of the district-wide assessments is happening just a week before the state testing, which seems to me troubling, because you would want to have the kids ramping up and preparing for the state tests and not focusing on district-wide assessments.
Mr. Forget?
Yeah, we'll check the assessment calendar for that. I believe you may be referring to, I don't know if you are, the iReady assessments. But we'll check into that and review whether we need to move that or not. We will get back to you on that.
Thank you.
Mr. Howard?
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Forge and your team. So as I look at these numbers and we talk about after school programs, we talk about the Empire programs, we talk about the resources that we're trying to put out there for our scholars. My question would be, how do we try to incorporate our parents into these conversations to encourage them, to encourage their children, the kids, to participate? Because the last thing a 7th, 8th, and 9th grader wants to do is stay after school or become a part of an after school program. It's not the cool thing, and we know that. So are we thinking of different ways to approach these problems by including the parents or different ways of explaining to young people the importance of English language and math and the whole idea behind the curriculum, how important it is? Because I think we're making assumptions that aren't true. We assume that because the kid needs the help, that he's going to go get the help, or they're going to try to get the help. And I don't think that's happening. I think there's a disconnect with the testing and an actual curriculum and an actual idea of what they need to understand, what they need to know, and where they need to get better. There's got to be a disconnect. There's something that's not happening that needs to happen and that we're missing. We're missing something here, Madam President. You can't show me a kid that does not want to be successful. But there's a disconnect going on here. Maybe we need to start thinking outside of the box about how to identify, how to get the families to understand the importance. Because a lot of times, kids don't understand the importance until the 11th grade or 12th grade, and then find out they're not going to graduate, or it gets so frustrating that at age 16 they decide to say, "The heck with it, I'm done. I'm out of here." This is something that we have to do better. Thank you, Madam President.
Mrs. Moriarty?
Thank you, Mr. Howard and the board. One of the things that we're working on in our offices now is putting together documents of what are the expected outcomes by grade level, so parents can truly understand by the time a child is finished with kindergarten, what is it that they're supposed to be able to know and do in real parent-friendly terms, right? And all the way up the line. The other thing that we do this year, we have a new elementary report card in a much more parent-friendly language. Well, it still is about standards-based grading and what students need to know. They're in I can statements. So what can the students do? So hopefully when parent-teacher conferences are held, teachers and parents will have conversations about what are the things that their students can do on grade level really well, where is the need of improvement, and what are some things that they can do at home in conjunction with the library, in conjunction with the Armory programs, with the Mount programs. And last year, you might recall, we ran mini programs over the holiday breaks and spring breaks. We're going to do that again this year, and hoping to build in a parent component, at least for an hour or so, to explain the high level of importance and really knowing your learner. How does your child learn best? Are they visual? Are they kinesthetic? Are they auditory? And what are things that you can do with your child at home and out in the community to meet their learning needs? Those are just some of the things off the top of my head that we're working on right now.
And Mr. Howard, I think one of the other one of the other strategies we used when we were moving in a really good direction with math several years ago was we did math nights at the elementary level. And a math night was when a student came with their parent and actually learned math in an evening and actually had fun doing it, because then it gave the parent the opportunity to learn at the same way the student was learning, so that when they're home, there's that agreement and that understanding as to we're both doing this, we're both learning together, and there's not that fight to sit down and do your homework, right? Yeah. It's more, remember when we had fun the other night at that math night? Let's do it again. Let's do it at the kitchen table. But given the families the capacity to engage and do that at home, we've got to get back to those opportunities in the evening for parent support. And I think COVID really hurt us on that, and we need to move back on it.
Thank you, Mr. Fortune.
Mr. Strickland.
Thank you, Madam President. We've been here on the board together for 8 years, and I know everyone here is frustrated with what's happening. It's the same every year. I mean, to me, a lot of it starts at home. It starts at home, and a lot of kids don't have the home environment that's needed to be productive at school. So I think we're doing the best as possible with what we have. We need to fine tune and know that everyone is trying to do the best they can. But if the kids come to school and they're, like you said, they're hungry, or they're, the situation at home isn't positive, then it's hard to be positive at school. So I think the community itself is frustrated, and you're seeing it in the results that's happening this past couple of weeks. And it's hard to find a solution other than let's focus on the kids and not on what's been going on the last 8 years. Let's just move forward. Hopefully we can move forward. Thank you.
Mr. Howard.
Yes, Madam President. I think that this is the opportunity. This is an opportunity for a call to action. We really need to start having more conversations with our students and our families, so that we can really understand what their needs are. We've made too many assumptions over time, and obviously our assumptions are wrong. And when you can have those personal conversations with families and students in a private environment, in their homes or someplace where they feel comfortable and they can explain to you what their needs are. And I gotta be perfectly honest with you. It's hard to study, it's hard to do schoolwork when you're starving. It's hard to study, it's hard to do schoolwork when you have a parent that's not in the home. It's hard to study, it's hard to do good in school when you're focusing on sleeping in a house with no heat. It's hard. And we talked about this years ago, about wraparound services, about making contact with social services, with the Department of Social Services, and understanding our families better. I think we need to refocus on that. I think we need to know our student population and our families better and stop assuming. Not that we are assuming, but what I'm saying is it's something that we need to do better. We need to start understanding our families. We need to start understanding our population, the demographics, what we're dealing with in this community. We need to have boots on the ground. We need to be in our communities, going to our scholars' homes, finding out what do they need? What do they need to be successful? What can we do as a district? I'm not saying we're the end-all panacea, can solve everything here, but we can put them in touch and contact with some support services that can help them do better. There's families in this community that are struggling so bad. School is not on the priority list. I hate to say that. We know that it needs to be, but when you're making a decision between putting food on your family's table, or putting heat in your home, or sometimes the priorities are a little different. And if we need to try to find out ways to help our families, Madam President, we have to. We got to do better.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. Spoken from your heart as usual. Mrs. Carol Ann?
Thank you very much. I'm just feeling everything that everybody is saying. And, I resonate so much with you, Mr. Howard, and your heartfelt concern. It takes a village, and I know that's so often an overused term, but to really own that, it's not just the schools that can solve this problem. It's all of the institutions that are in our city coming together to raise up these children and these families. Today at the library, I spent 3/4 of my day trying to find food and housing for people. And that's not something that people necessarily associate with the library, but this is where folks are coming in. They're coming in because there's heat in the winter, there's air conditioning in the summer, there's support after school, there's support in the evenings. We're open 4 nights a week, we're open on the weekends, we're open all summer long. So it's one of another institution that can support these children and families. And unless we are all working together really strongly to raise these folks up and to build this foundation and for the families to know that everywhere they go, there's someone that's going to help them, then people are going to fall through the cracks. Children are going to fall through the cracks. And so I don't know what the overall solution is, but it has to involve working together, connecting, sharing resources, and strategizing how we're going to meet our children and our families where they are and how the different institutions are going to support our families.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you all for your comments. Mr. Forget, I see no more hands.
Thank you, Madam President. Our last conversation this evening is just to give a quick update as to the work we've been doing in the district with regards to a lot of the things we've been talking about, how the pandemic has truly impacted our students, our families, and our faculty staff, and as well as some of the issues that are occurring within the community. We've done some really deep work this week. We have, first of all, I really have to say thank you to our students, our families, our faculty, our staff, our teachers. They have been amazing this week, navigating, first of all, first and foremost, keeping all of our students safe, keeping our faculty and staff safe, and also teaching at the same time and protecting the instruction that needs to be delivered. Are we perfect? No, but we're going to get there. And we're all going to start to look, listen, and learn and grow together as we do that. I also want to make a heartfelt thank you to all of the law enforcement agencies that have protected our students as they arrive and are dismissed at the end of the day. We've had support from the Sheriff's Department. We've had support from the state troopers. Each of our municipalities has chipped in, and an amazing job by our City of Newburgh Police Department. Chief Gerasi has been terrific to work with, constantly keeping us abreast of what we need to know in order to make some decisions. But again, when you're making decisions about the safety of students, faculty, and staff, you have to really take a look at everything and make sure you're using the data in the right way. And listening to feedback. Feedback is really critical. I read every single email that gets sent into my email box. I may not respond to everyone because we do get quite a few, but please keep sending them. We're reading them and we're reacting to them. Again, we might not be responding immediately, or it may take some time, but we are listening and we are reviewing them. As we move forward, what are some things that we need to talk about? You know, Ms. Burton spoke this week and she talked about root causes, and she continues to drive that conversation. It's not just addressing the symptom. What's the cause of the issue? We're trying to figure out what's going on with our students and how can we connect our instruction to meet those needs. So we've been using something called a panorama survey, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because we just got the baseline data back last week. But I do want to share something with you that I found to be pretty important for us to take a look at. So why are our students behaving the way that they are, whether it's positive or whether it's a struggle? Well, let's take a look at what the kids are saying to us. I can tell you that the survey results are strong. Just at NFA Maine alone, we had 1,197 responses to this survey. And from this survey, just at NFA Maine, we learned that the students are really having a difficult time with positive feelings, emotional regulation, and a sense of belonging. That's not enough. We have to drill down even deeper. So what does a sense of belonging mean? And specifically within a sense of belonging, why are the students feeling the way they're feeling? And what kind of embedded supports will we have to provide in order to address those? When you look at the agenda this evening in the human resources section, you're going to see some additional school social workers, some psychologists, and some counselors. Those individuals are going to be targeted to support the needs of the students that were identified through these particular surveys. So we're really looking closely at the needs of the kids, not just applying another resource, not just applying another person. We're trying to figure out what it is the students need and then associate those staff individuals to the needs of the student. The other thing we're working on pretty closely is working with the administrators and the faculty and staff to make sure that our standard operating procedures are tight. We got a lot of feedback from the teachers requesting for very tight protocols. Tight protocols, anyone that's been a classroom teacher, rituals and routines, rituals and routines. People understand what to do when you have rituals and routines. So some of the standard operating procedures we're looking at have to do with student arrival, student dismissal, students entering and exiting the cafeteria and how to behave during the cafeteria experience, transitions in the halls. We are tightening up those standard operating procedures and communicating them out, not only to the teachers, not only to the administrators, but to the students so that they're taught what it means to function within that particular procedure. And we'll guide them and we'll help them to get there. So the standard operating procedures are some things that each of the schools are working on right now. One of the other things that we have is Dr. Roman's been instrumental in connecting to a lot of different outside supports. Tomorrow we have a meeting with SNUG. SNUG is a group of individuals that are going to come in and help us with mediation and talking to students and working with families and really addressing the behaviors that the students are exhibiting, not only in school, but connecting it to the behaviors in the community. And Dr. Roman will be facilitating that. He's already met with some of the high school campuses and will continue to do that. One of the other collaborations we're trying to put together would be to connect with our interagency team, which is our social services department and some of the other divisions out of Orange County, as well as the Office of Probation to learn a little bit more about those specific things that we can put in place to address large group behavior in a school. And those are some of the things that we're working on. Again, once we unpack that panorama survey, we'll give you the specifics of what we're going to focus on with our students and the roles and responsibilities of the individuals to do it. My last comment is this is everyone working together to address it. I have a role to address this. The senior staff has a role to address this. The administrators in the school have a role to address this. The teachers, the faculty, the staff, the parents, and the students, we all have to come together to address this. But we have to name what it is they have to address, and we're getting to that point very shortly.
Mr. Forget, Mr. Stridiron has a question.
Sure. Hello, Mr. Stridiron.
Hello. So thank you for the presentation. And I do agree that everyone has a role. So at Maine specifically, do you inform the board or give us some ideas, like how many students, like what are the major problems that I'm hearing is a number of students roaming the halls between as classes are happening and disrupting the learning of the classes that are in progress. You have a small number of students who are consistently in the hallways, just roaming from place to place. And the students who want to learn at that point are being disruptive and they're not having a normal high school experience. It's always constantly being interrupted by things going on in the hallway, fights happening, and unsafe conditions. So what is being done to address the roaming in the halls that is occurring at the high school level?
Thank you. So we have narrowed it down to a small, like you said, it's a small group of individuals that tend to be in the halls. Our administrators are much more present in the hallways as we move into addressing this. We are finding locations to move those students, whether it be into the auditorium or the library. One of the things we did struggle with this year was the pandemic and having to space students out for lunch and having the available room to begin to address these things. I think that our high school is moving in a really good direction right now. I think between the work of Mr. Tyndall, working with the monitors to reassign them and to kind of look at where they are, and reposition them. Really take a close look at student entry and the procedures there. I think that out of conversations with the teachers last week, I heard very clearly that there were certain areas that they wanted us to really focus on, and we're trying to focus on that together. As I said to you, those areas are hallway transitions. If you think about NFA Main, you get 2,500 kids in those halls, what, 9 times, 10 times a day. And within 3 to 4 minutes, they have to get from point A to point B. So in doing that, I think we have to put that into that context. We're getting those kids into those classrooms. There's a small percentage that's not, but there's a large percentage that is. And we still have to work on trying to get every kid into those classrooms. We're not perfect with that, Mr. Stridiron, but we're working on it. And I will admit we have to work on that.
Go ahead. You have another question, Mr. Stridiron?
Yes, it's regarding the spacing, the social distancing at South Middle School. We had a visit last week, and I know that the other people that were on the tour seemed to be surprised at the lunchroom and the gym being used as a lunchroom with no, or at least in the gym, no air circulation. Can you talk about how that's going to be addressed? There were very little social distancing and literally no air in that gym during the lunch period.
So ventilation in the gym was not brought up to me as a concern. Mr. Bear was on that visit. Mr. Bear participated in. Mr. Bear, can you share any insights as to what you saw?
Well, I think we also, Mr. Stridiron, we were there, we talked about it. We were seeing also students, they were transitioning. They have 2 different spaces where they provide lunch. So as they in the main and cafeteria, they were having students come up online, and then the students from the second part, which is the gym, were also coming up. So there was a lot of busyness that was certainly going on. I've had preliminary conversations with Ms. Brooks about it. She was trying to join us at that time, as Mr. Stridiron knows, but there were some student concerns she was addressing. She's very hands-on that way, and we intend to follow up. I don't know if we can argue that there was no ventilation. We know that there was a question about whether doors in the back were open, and Mr. Stridiron did observe they were not. So that's something that Ms. Brooks and I will talk about. We are trying, again, to feed hundreds of students, and we've created these non-traditional spaces, and it's always a work in progress.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely a challenge. It's not an easy situation when you have hundreds of kids trying to eat all at the same time, and there's no physical way to keep them 6 feet apart. But ventilation in the gym definitely is an issue, and it was, even though it was a little bit of cold that day, I mean, it was 45 degrees. The use of the outside space, it wasn't being used. So I know they have their coats with them. So maybe it's possible that it could be rotated somehow, where they can spend some time outside getting some fresh air during that time, because we have had a large amount of cases in COVID in the last week at South Middle School. So it's definitely concerning.
We appreciate that feedback. We will definitely look into that. Thank you, Mr. Stridiron.
Mr. Fortune, I see no more hands.
That concludes my items. Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, team.
Thank you, Mr. Forget and team. We're now at the section of the agenda for public discussion and comments on agenda items. Please refer to the regulations regarding discussion and comments. Mr. McCoy?
We have 2 people signed up, ma'am. One person's coming into her room. Her name is Miss Bridget Brom. If Miss Brom can turn on her camera, the floor is yours.
Hello, my name is Bridget Brom. I live off of West Street. I'm just gonna pull up something real quick. Can everybody see me?
You can see you, ma'am.
If you can see, this is the wooded area I'm going to talk about. This is NFA Main. This is the neighborhood I live in. Okay. That forest is now in the ongoing process of being cleared. We live close. Obviously, taking these trees down has been loud. We can smell exhaust from the heavy equipment. We can see our new line of sight to vehicular traffic, streetlights, and parking lots in the distance. Noise is noticeably traveling across the site. At night, there's already a visible increase in light pollution since this forest clearing has occurred. Back in 2019, we voted in favor of the district-wide capital improvement project, which authorized, this is quoted straight from the ballot, a new career and technology center school building at the campus of Newburgh Free Academy. That was the extent of detail in regard to specifically the site location that was written on the ballot. I would say we definitely knew we were voting for a building at this location, but we were not voting on the design details or the process. After that election, I began to closely follow the capital improvement project webpage for design progress updates. There have been just 3 brief updates on that webpage for the CTE project. There was an update back on January 26, 2021. Exterior and interior conceptual drawings were shown at a BOE meeting. The initial design phase is nearing completion. There were no updates between that and November 1st, 2021, when the update "Site work has begun" was posted. There are some renderings posted to that webpage, and almost all show just the building, architectural renderings with no landscape shown. There is something that looks like a conceptual landscape plan, and you cannot enlarge it to view it closer, but you can tell it doesn't include much detail, typical of a conceptual design. Conceptual design is not a complicated phrase. Its definition is an early phase of the design process in which the broad outlines of function and form of something are articulated. That leaves me some hope that we are not far enough along in the site's landscape plan to consider it farther. Why is this so important? Taking into consideration very current events, I'd start with repeat findings from studies about the association between lack in tree cover and more gun assaults. Among this, I'm concerned about asthma rates. How much did those trees contribute to ambient air temperature reduction? Exposure to nature, improving mental health and reducing stress. Interacting with nature has been shown to be widely effective in reducing ADHD symptoms. Studies showing the relationship of not enough tree cover to higher rates of both property crime and violent crime. I don't have enough time today to get far into the science and facts, but I believe most people already have a good idea of how important nature is. And nature is really not mowed grass and a few sporadic non-native trees. It has to be more considered in design. It has to use native plants. It has to have layers, ground covers, shrubs, small trees, large trees. This is what draws in pollinators, birds, and wildlife. It is undeniable that this site before it was cleared was valuable, dense, and diverse nature, made up of numerous old trees. These trees were valuable to human health and they were valuable to wildlife. One of many wildlife stories that comes to mind is in summer around dusk. My partner and I would sit in our backyard and watch bats fly out of those woods, swooping down in our yard to eat mosquitoes. We thought, how cool is this? Bat species are rapidly in decline, largely due to habitat loss. Yet within the limits of a city, we got to see bats in our own backyard. It was especially welcome during the pandemic. I'm fully aware that the school district has the right to move forward on projects without informing the community. Numerous federal and state agencies have this right as well. However, those agencies rarely exercise it, largely thanks to pressure to be better from stakeholders and communities. I'm optimistic that the Board of Ed has the moral decency to see this project through from this point forward with more caution regarding environmental impact, more effort to mitigate the damage already done by clear-cutting a forest, more widely advertised notifications to the community, and a high level of openness to community involvement in the remainder of the CTE project, such as through a collaborative charrette between landscape architects and at minimum, the neighborhoods adjacent to this construction. This way, we can float ideas such as screening buildings, parking lots, and other unsightly infrastructure from view by way of vegetation. There's opportunity here to improve aesthetics while restoring some of the wildlife food cover and habitat that was cut down. We could require dark sky-friendly lighting, prohibiting unshielded lighting, therefore being sure not to contribute to light pollution, which has impacts on health. By considering ideas such as these in the design process, not only is an educational opportunity.
Ms. Brahm, Ms. Brahm,
I'm
can you
wrapping
wrap
up.
it up?
But the
Because your
health of
5
our
minutes is over.
the health of our environment and therefore the health of our children would be more considered. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. McCoy?
Yeah, you have one other person that submitted it in writing. Her name is Miss Naomi Harrison Ringskog. She left the following message. Before the school district cleared the West Street Forest, I wrote a letter to the board on April 22nd, 2021, listing the many reasons for the board to consider revising the current plan and try to preserve as much of the forest as possible. One hopeful result of that meeting was for Roger Ramjug to meet with the Newburgh Conservation Advisory Council to discuss the ways mitigating the negative plans. Since then, we have not seen any answers to the CAC's questions nor any published report. On a matter that impacts our neighborhood, the city, and our children, it's appropriate for the school and the architects to be more responsive and transparent on this issue. That said, right now the forest is gone and there are only a few trees lining the edges. We have lost habitat, social well-being, recreation, stormwater management, mitigation, heat island reduction, and many other benefits. So why am I here? I believe the replanting is crucial and reducing the parking lot is necessary. On these two issues, I asked the board to consider doing the following. 1, circulate the report to the public so we know how many trees were cut and how many species were lost in the current plan for replanting. 2, hire a landscape architect who can independently suggest how to replant as many trees to recover the loss of our vegetation and restore some of the benefits of the urban forest. 3, reduce the parking lot. Besides it being an eyesore when the school is closed on the weekends and the summer months, it has delirious effects. To retain parking space, create on-street parking. This is a trend that the city of Newburgh planning and engineering is encouraging. This will also encourage more walking, less speeding, and a more cost-effective solution. This maximizes the utility of existing infrastructure without displacing green vegetation. The current plans for bioswales and trees in the parking lot barely cover enough coverage to be effective for providing shade or stormwater mitigation. Number 4, last inspirational request. We are excited that our students will have new space and equipment to excel in technical skills. In the future, where there'll be green roofs installed to not only mitigate heat, stormwater, and create better cooling for the building and students, but also be an educational moment for our students. All these big and new interventions are important when considering NFA was built on the location of a pond that was created from springs and runoff from higher elevations, such as the new CTE building location. And new runoff from the construction of the building and parking lots will negatively impact NFA and the stadium field. Nature is our ally. Please consider being a model for other communities and do what is in your power to advance tree equity and restore our city's urban tree canopy. That's the end of that comment, and there is nobody else signed up for public comment, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. McCoy. We're going to go to our board committees. First one is the Personnel Committee. That's me. So all of the items discussed at the Personnel Committee are here on the agenda for tonight's meeting. And we're going to go to Buildings and Grounds Committee. That's Mr. Levenstein.
Thank you, Madam President. So Building and Grounds Committee met November 17th, and the committee discussed with Mr. Velez the building conditions survey update, Heritage Water Service, the Bombville Natural Gas Regulator, Washington Street Building Break-In, Building Facilities Visits, the West Street Front Door Replacement, Facility Use Requests, the Old Bombville School Demolition Update, and the NFA North Parking Lot Repaving. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Levenstein. We're going to move on to the Library Committee. Mr. Sturdine.
Thank you, Madam President. The Library Committee met November 18th. We had the Director's Report, and we have 2 items on tonight's agenda for vote. And we also had a discussion about how the library can possibly be used as a safe place in combination with other safe places around the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stradarian. We're going to move on to the Policy Committee. Mr. Howard.
Thank you, Madam President. Policy Committee, we met on November 18th and we discussed two items, Regulation 5411, and we also talked about a resolution to adopt policy number 0101, which is in reference to the gender neutral single occupancy bathrooms in the school district. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. We're going to move on to this, my section of the agenda. I have items 5.1 and 5.2 as a consent agenda this evening. Would any member like to separate out any of these items? Okay. I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Mr. Stradine,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson.
Yes.
I'd like to thank Mr. Howard and Mrs. Burton for volunteering to help create the goals that we just passed on this agenda. So thank you, both of you. We're going to move on to our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction Elementary, Mrs. Moriarty.
Thank you, Madam President. Elementary Curriculum Instruction presents item 6.1 for your approval this evening.
I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Mr. Stradine,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam President. That concludes my items.
Thank you, Mrs. Moriarty. We're going to move on to our Assistant Superintendent for Exceptional Learners, Mr. Bayer.
Thank you, Madam President. Exceptional Learners has one item for the board's consideration this evening, item 7.1.
I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Mr. Stradine,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. That concludes my items.
Thank you, Mr. Bayer. We're going to move on to our Assistant Superintendent for Finance, Dr. Spindler.
Thank you, Madam President. I present to the board items 8.1 through 8.6 as a consent agenda for your consideration.
Would any member like to separate out any of these items? Yes, Mrs. Burton.
8.6.
Okay. Mr. Stridiron?
8.5, please.
Okay. So I'd like to entertain a motion on items 8.1 through 8.4.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion on those items? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Mr. Stradine,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida.
Yes.
Let's move on to item 8.5, please. I'd like to entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Mr. Stridiron.
Thank you, Madam President. So I'm not sure if the bids, the documentation is public or not. Am I allowed to discuss the specifics of each one?
Yeah, that's public knowledge, sir.
Okay, thank you. So there were 4 bids for the demolition of the building. 3 of them were near $1 million or more, and the one low bid was $432,000. So then I went and looked at the scope of work in each of the bids, and I definitely have some questions on this low bid. It seems like it's missing some of the items that are covered in the other bids. So was there a specific scope of work that all of the contracts had to have? Because the wording of each of the contracts is different. The scope, it should be very similar. Was there a document that each one had to, like, no matter what it says in this scope of work, is there going to be a document that says you have to do all these items?
Dr. Spindler?
Thank you. So yes, it was concerning to us too, receiving the bids to see one which was significantly lower. However, throughout this whole process, estimates were given to me within the range of the bid that we're posing to accept this evening. So it was, this is a contractor that is a little bit further upstate, and we had to do value engineering. We had to have discussions with them as we would in any bid process to make sure that they understood truly what the work is and what we needed, because it was an outlier in the bid. Our construction manager, Lou Rodriguez, who we saw earlier today, was part of that process and assured me and obviously the board with the recommendation that the job will be able to be done at this. Any specific questions that you might have, Mr. Stridiron, please feel free to pose them to me, and I will work along with Mr. Rodriguez, with CPL and with this general construction work to get you the appropriate answers that you may need.
All right, well, can I ask the questions now and then you can find the answers out later?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so the first one is the oil and sewage remediation. Is that going to be part of this process? Because there is a septic tank on site, septic field, and there's oil been spilled in the past in the back area of the building. Two, when is the work going to be done? Because it's saying it's going to be done during the day. Is that during school time? Because if you have asbestos abatement and you have particles possibly transmitting over into the ventilation system of the building, that's a concern. Number three, inspection by the town. Are there going to be on-site inspectors from the building department to make sure that all the regulations are going to be followed? And the demolition permit, is that going to be processed through the town of Newburgh building department? And the last is all the three higher cost proposals all said prevailing wage. This low cost one does not say anything about prevailing wage. So that means they're using non-union labor. Is that the case?
Okay, I have all your questions written down and this is recorded and I will get them to you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Levinstein?
Thank you, Madam President. So Dr. Spindler, I think I have some simpler questions for you. As this was not on the building and grounds agenda, it wasn't in time. Is there a timetable? Is there a certain time when it is planned that this would go forward? And also, is there any expectation that there's going to be disruption to the school, the Bonneville school, or are you planning this to be done when there's a holiday break? Thank you.
Yeah, so obviously it's an emergency situation, so we want to make sure that we're moving as aggressively on this as we can. There is going to be a disruption in that we do have to close the road there. So we have to just make sure that we're notifying, the appropriate and making sure that, our bus companies are aware of, because there is going to be a road closure. So when we get when this is, or if this is approved this evening, then we will have a timeline, just as we do in all of our construction projects, to make sure when we are starting, which community stakeholders do we have to reach out to regarding this, and et cetera.
Thank you.
Mr. Stridiron, I see your hand again.
Yes, Dr. Spindler mentioned the road closure. So even though the section of the road you're going to be closing is a town road, you would probably have to get a approval from the state, since it's so close to the intersection of Route 9W, which is a state highway. You're probably going to need a road closure permit from the state, which could take a long time. So you might need to work on that quickly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on this item? Roll call, Mr. Clerk, on 8.5.
Mr. Stridiron,
No.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
No.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo.
Yes.
That item passes.
Thank you. We're going to move on to item 8.6. I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Mrs. Burton.
Yeah, so we had some conversation earlier, at least I did, around the roles and responsibility of sheriffs and other law enforcement in our schools. Personally, I don't agree with law enforcement being in schools. We do have security monitors. So what I understand is their role is to provide safety. They can move across municipalities and deploy outside help. I would suggest that because of the recent violence, there is already a increased presence of law enforcement in the Newburgh community. I understand that they have been helpful in terms of monitoring the perimeters of our schools. And I think for my purposes and for how I feel about this, that is enough. I don't believe in law enforcement in our schools. It's intimidating to particularly young people of color who come from environments, urban areas where policing is not favorable in terms of the way policing happens in urban environments, particularly in the city of Newburgh. And because our schools, particularly our high schools, are majority students of color, I don't believe it's a good idea. And I would like for us to reevaluate why we want law enforcement in our schools to this extent. And that's all I have to say about this subject.
Thank you, Mrs. Burton. We're going to go on to Mr. Howard.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to move to table this resolution.
I need a second.
Second.
Roll call to table.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
No.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein,
No.
Ms. Maida,
No.
Ms. Mineo,
No.
Mr. Stridiron.
No.
That item fails.
Okay, so we still have the item on the table. And are there any other questions? Mr. Howard, do you have another question?
Yeah, I did have a question. We had discussed some information that we were going to follow up on. That's why I moved the table till we got the information back from Mr. Forget. That was my assumption.
Tabling failed, so we're going to move forward, okay? Any other questions or comments on this item? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
No.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron,
Yes.
Ms. Burton.
No.
That item passes.
That concludes my items for this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Spindler. We're going to move on to our Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources, Mr. McLemore.
Thank you, Madam President. On the Human Resources agenda, I have items 9.1 through 9.25 for your consideration on tonight.
Would any member like to separate out any of these items? Yes, Mr. Stridiron.
Yes, Madam President, 9.4, 9.11, 9.12.
Okay. Anybody else? I don't see any other hands. I'd like to entertain a motion on 9.1 through 9.3, 9.5 through 9.10. Well, let's do it this way. All items except 9.4, 9.11, and 9.12. I'd like to entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron,
No.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson.
Yes.
Let's move on to item 9.4, please. I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion on 9.4, Mr. Stridiron?
Thank you, Madam President. I'll be careful how I talk about this. So all I can say about, we're only doing 9.11, right now?
No, we're doing 9.4.
Oh, okay. I thought we already voted on 9.4.
No, we did not.
Okay. Basically, on this one, I just don't think that we need another director at this point. I think we need to focus on the classroom. The state test scores really put a focus on, we need to hire massive amounts of help in our school classrooms. So I just don't think we need another director. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron,
No.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard.
Yes.
We're going to move on to item 9.11. I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Questions or discussion? Mr. Stridiron?
Thank you, Madam President. So on this item, we need to support the people that work in our buildings to keep our people safe, to keep the students safe from hurting each other. And I think it sends the wrong message to the students, saying that the adults are being punished for doing what they're paid to do, but the students pretty much get off without any kind of consequences. We need to have strong supports in our schools, not just for our students, but for our staff. And I really hope we get to the point where we can get to a place where our schools literally are safe for everyone, not just for people that have connections. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on this item? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron,
No.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
No.
Mr. Howard,
No.
Mr. Levinstein.
Yes.
That item fails.
Okay, let's move on to item 9.12. I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Mr. Stridiron?
It's basically, I just want to say the same thing I said before. Thank you.
Thank you. Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron,
No.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
No.
Mr. Howard,
No.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida.
Yes.
That item fails.
Thank you. Mr. Macklemore?
Thank you, Madam President. That concludes my items for tonight.
Thank you. We're going to move on to the clerk of the board, Mr. McCoy.
Good evening, Madam President. I have the approval of the minutes from November 9th, 2021.
I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Can I have a second?
Second that.
Questions or discussion? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Stridiron,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Ms. Green. Sorry, Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo.
Yes,
That concludes my items, Madam President, and happy Thanksgiving.
thank you. We're going to move on to public comment. We're now at the portion of the agenda for public discussion on non-agenda items. Mr. McCoy?
Our lucky day, ma'am. Nobody signed up.
Okay, thank you, sir. I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Moved.
Second.
Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes,
Mr. Stridiron.
Yes.
thank you and happy Thanksgiving, everyone. See you in December.